Roses are red, violets are blue. You are a heavy burden, nobody wants you here. That was the message written inside the Father's Day card my daughter forced into my hands. Everyone was sitting in the living room that Sunday, and the moment I read it out loud, the whole place shook with laughter. My grandchildren clapped their hands, my son-in-law whistled, and even my own daughter was laughing so hard that tears rolled down her cheeks. But I wasn't laughing. My chest tightened, and my lips trembled. I stood frozen, the card shaking in my hand. At first, I thought it was a cruel joke, but then I saw the way they looked at me. Not a single face showing regret. They all meant it. They all wanted me gone. And just when I thought the humiliation couldn't get worse, my phone on the table lit up and started ringing. I didn't pick it up. But when it rang again, and then again, my heart skipped a beat. By the time it rang the 10th time, everyone stopped laughing. By the 15th time, they looked uneasy. By the 60th time, their smiles had faded completely. Nobody knew what was waiting on the other end of that call. And what happened after I finally picked up the phone changed everything. But let me not get ahead of myself. My name is Margaret, but everyone calls me Grandma Maggie. I'm 72 years old, and I live in a small town in Ohio, USA. Before I begin, please don't forget to subscribe, like this story, and click the notification button for more upcoming interesting stories. And while you're at it, let me know from which part of the country you're watching from. I love to hear where my viewers are listening in from. Now let's go back to the beginning, to how all this started. It was a warm Sunday morning in June. The kind of day where families everywhere are cooking barbecue, buying flowers, and giving hugs to the fathers in their lives. But in my house, Father's Day felt different. Ever since my husband died 10 years ago, I always felt like I didn't quite fit in anymore. My daughter, Claire, took me in, but over the years, she started treating me less like a mother and more like an unwanted guest. I still tried my best. I woke up early, cooked breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, and even set the table. I wanted everyone to feel loved. My grandchildren ran around the house, playing, shouting, laughing. I smiled, though my heart was heavy. Claire's husband, James, walked into the kitchen and smirked at me. "You don't need to do all that," he said. "Just sit down and don't break anything." His words stung, but I kept quiet. Later that morning, the family gathered in the living room. They had balloons, decorations, and gifts for James, who sat like a king in his chair. I clapped politely when they handed him presents. But then Claire turned to me and said with a sly smile, "Mom, we got something for you too." She pulled out a card. A Father's Day card. I frowned, confused. "Why would I get a Father's Day card?" I asked. "Because you're always interfering in everything, like you're the head of this house," she said. "Now read it." I should have known something was wrong by the way they all leaned forward, eager for me to open it. But I didn't. I obeyed. I opened the card. I read the words. And the laughter exploded. In that moment, I felt like my soul was crushed. Every sacrifice I had ever made, every meal, every late-night prayer, every tear I had shed for them, none of it mattered. To them, I was nothing but a burden. The laughter still rang in my ears when my phone started buzzing. At first, I ignored it. Who would even call me? Most of my old friends had either passed on, or were too sick to talk. But the calls didn't stop. The phone rang over and over, until it became unbearable. Claire frowned. "Who keeps calling you like that?" she asked. I don't know," I whispered. James snorted. "Probably a scammer. Don't bother picking it up." But by the 20th call, even he stopped smirking. By the 30th, my daughter's laughter had died down. By the 40th, silence filled the room. I reached for the phone with trembling hands, my heart pounding in my chest. On the screen it only said, "Unknown number." "Don't answer that," James said quickly. But my gut told me otherwise. Something inside me knew this wasn't just an ordinary call. When the phone rang for the 60th time, I pressed the green button. "Hello," I whispered. What I heard on the other end made my blood run cold. But before I tell you what the caller said, let me take you back to earlier that week. Because what led to that terrifying phone call didn't just begin on Father's Day. No, it started long before, in ways I didn't even realize at the time. 3 days before Father's Day, I was in the backyard tending to the small garden. Gardening had always been my escape. When I'm surrounded by flowers, I feel alive. As I was pulling weeds, I noticed something strange. A man standing by the fence, staring at me. He wore a black hoodie. Even though the sun was blazing hot, his face was hidden, but I could feel his eyes burning into me. I froze, gripping the small shovel in my hand. "Can I help you?" I called out. The man didn't answer. He just turned and walked away slowly, disappearing down the street. When I told Claire about it, she laughed. "Mom, you watch too many crime shows. It was probably just a neighbor walking by." But my gut told me something wasn't right. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing noises outside my window. At first I thought it was just the wind, but when I peeked through the curtains, I saw shadows moving in the driveway. The next morning, James complained that his car door had been left open. Nothing was stolen, but it felt like someone had been inside. He blamed me, saying I must have forgotten to close it, but I knew I hadn't touched his car. By the time Father's Day came, I already felt on edge. I just didn't expect the humiliation from my family to be the spark that would push everything into chaos. Because when I finally answered that mysterious phone call, the voice on the other end didn't sound like a scammer. It sounded like someone who knew me. Someone who had been watching. "Grandma Maggie," the voice said, cold and sharp. "I warned you. Now it's too late." And then the line went dead. I dropped the phone, my hand shaking so badly it almost fell to the floor. Claire jumped up, her face pale. "Who was that?" she demanded. I looked at her, my throat dry. "Someone who knows me. Someone who's been watching this house." The grandchildren's laughter turned into frightened whispers. James tried to act tough, but I could see fear in his eyes. And me? My heart pounded so hard I thought I would faint. Because I realized in that moment that my humiliation wasn't the worst thing that was going to happen that day. Something far darker was waiting at our door. And before any of us could react, there was a knock. A slow, heavy knock at the front door. The knock came again. Slow. Heavy. Each thud against the door made my heart jump inside my chest. Knock on knock. The laughter that once filled the living room had turned into silence so sharp. You could hear the ticking of the old wall clock. My grandchildren huddled close together, whispering, their small faces pale with fear. James stood up quickly, trying to act brave, but I saw his hand tremble as he reached for the curtain. He pulled it back just an inch and froze. There's nobody out there," he muttered. Claire's face twisted. "Don't play games, James. Somebody's knocking. I'm telling you, I don't see anyone." He stepped back, his voice cracking, though he tried to mask it with anger. "This is some stupid prank. Probably those neighborhood kids messing around." But deep inside I knew it wasn't kids. That phone call had warned me. "I warned you. Now it's too late." The knock came again. Louder. Stronger. The walls seemed to vibrate with each sound. "Knock on knock," I whispered. "Don't open it." But James puffed out his chest. "I'm not letting some idiot scare us in our own house." He marched to the door, his hand reaching for the knob. My instincts screamed, "James, stop." I shouted, louder than I had in years. Everyone turned to me, shocked at my voice. "Don't you dare open that door." James hesitated, glaring at me like he always did when I stood my ground. But for the first time, I saw something else in his eyes, doubt. Then suddenly silence. The knocking stopped. The house went still. We waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Nothing. The children started to relax, whispering nervously, while Claire scolded me under her breath. "See what you did? You scared the kids for no reason." But just as she finished her words, a loud bang shook the back of the house. It was the unmistakable sound of the garden gate slamming shut. The children screamed. Claire jumped to her feet. James ran to the back window, peeking out with wide eyes. "The gate's moving," he muttered. "Someone was just out there." "I told you," I said, clutching the Father's Day card in my trembling hands. "Someone is watching this house." But instead of comforting me, Claire glared. "Mom, you're feeding into this. Maybe it's your so-called friend who keeps calling. Maybe you're the one who brought this nonsense to us." Her words cut deep. After all the years I had given to her, after raising her, after caring for her children, she had the nerve to blame me for the danger now creeping into our home. Still, I kept silent. Sometimes silence is louder than words. The rest of that afternoon was heavy with tension. James locked all the doors and windows, pacing the living room like a restless guard dog. The children clung to me, refusing to play outside. Claire tried to distract them by turning on the TV, but even the cartoons couldn't hide the fear on their faces. My phone lay on the table, silent at last. Whoever had called me 60 times had stopped, but the weight of that silence was worse than the ringing. As evening settled in, the air outside grew darker. The house seemed smaller, suffocating with every breath. I sat in my chair, staring at the shadows stretching across the walls. My mind went back to the man in the hoodie I had seen by the fence earlier that week. Was he the one behind this? And if so, why me? Just when I thought the night couldn't get more unsettling, the power went out. The lights flickered once, twice, then everything plunged into darkness. The children screamed again. Claire cursed under her breath. James grabbed a flashlight from the drawer, but the beam shook wildly as his hand trembled. "Calm down," he muttered to himself. "It's just a power outage. Happens all the time." But I knew better. This was no accident. Someone had cut the power. "James," I whispered, "check the fuse box." Reluctantly, he handed me the flashlight and went outside. We all listened in silence as the sound of his footsteps faded into the backyard. Minutes passed. Too many minutes. Then we heard it, a blood-curdling scream. Claire rushed to the back door. "James," she shouted. But no reply came. Only silence. I gripped the flashlight tighter, my heart hammering. Something inside me told me James was in trouble. But before any of us could move, the phone on the table lit up again. The same unknown number. My throat went dry. Slowly, I reached for it, my fingers shaking so badly I nearly dropped the flashlight. I answered. "Hello." This time, the voice was colder, harsher. "I told you not to ignore me, Grandma Maggie. Now one of your family members has paid the price." My breath caught. "What have you done?" A chilling laugh echoed through the phone. "Check the backyard." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in horror. Claire was tugging at my arm, panicked. "What did they say? What did you hear?" I swallowed hard, barely able to get the words out. "They said, James has paid the price." Claire's face turned ghostly pale. She bolted to the back door, yanking it open before I could stop her. The children started crying, terrified by the chaos around them. I ran after her, flashlight beam bouncing wildly across the dark yard. My breath came in sharp gasps as we reached the fuse box by the fence. And there, sprawled on the ground, was James. His face was pale, his eyes half open. A dark bruise marked his temple, as if he'd been struck. His chest rose and fell weakly. He was still alive, but barely conscious. Claire fell to her knees, shaking him. "James! James, wake up!" I scanned the yard, swinging the flashlight across the shadows. For just a split second, I caught sight of something, a figure standing by the trees, watching us. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished into the darkness. "They're here," I whispered. "They're watching us." Claire looked up at me with fury in her eyes. "This is your fault," she screamed. "If you hadn't answered that stupid phone, none of this would have happened." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "Claire, please. I didn't bring this. They were already watching us." But she didn't want to hear it. She was blinded by fear. We carried James inside and laid him on the couch. He groaned softly, still half unconscious. The children huddled around me, crying into my arms. I held them tightly, though my own body trembled. The power was still out. The whole house felt like a coffin. And I knew the figure outside wasn't finished with us. Just then there was another sound. Not a knock this time. Not a bang. It was the creak of the back door slowly opening. The creak of the back door cut through the silence like a knife. My blood froze. My heart slammed so hard against my ribs that I thought everyone in the room could hear it. The children clutched me tighter, their small fingers digging into my skin. Claire, still kneeling beside her half-conscious husband, whipped her head toward the kitchen where the sound had come from. The door was supposed to be locked. I had seen James slide the bolt across before he went outside. Yet now it was slowly swinging open, as if invisible hands were pushing it. Creeryheek. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was holding its breath. Claire screamed, "Close it! Close the door!" But I knew, whatever had opened that door wasn't waiting to be closed out. It was already inside. I forced myself to stand, though my knees wobbled. I held the flashlight high, the weak beam trembling as badly as my hands. The light landed on the door. It was open halfway now, the dark outside pressing in like a heavy fog. I took one cautious step forward. The floorboards groaned under my weight. That's when I saw it. A boot. Just one boot, stepping slowly onto the kitchen tiles. Then another. The figure was coming in. I gasped, nearly dropping the flashlight. Claire pulled James's limp body closer to her, screaming, "Stay away from us." But the figure didn't answer. Instead, it stepped fully into the kitchen. The hood covered its face, but I could feel its eyes, cold, sharp, merciless, fixed on me. "Who are you?" I shouted, though my voice cracked. For a moment, there was silence. Then, in a voice low and chilling, the stranger said, "You should have listened." Before I could react, the figure lunged forward. Everything after that became chaos. The children screamed so loudly that my ears rang. Claire tried to drag James across the floor, but his weight was too much for her. I swung the flashlight wildly, hitting the figure on the arm. It stumbled back for just a second, enough for me to shout, "Run!" Claire grabbed the children and bolted toward the front hallway. I followed close behind, my chest burning as I pushed my weak body harder than it had in years. The figure stomped after us, each step heavy, deliberate, unhurried. Like it knew no matter how fast we ran, we couldn't escape. We reached the front door, but when Claire twisted the knob, she screamed, "It's locked. It won't open." James must have latched it earlier. In the chaos, none of us had unlocked it. The footsteps behind us grew louder, closer. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting across the figure's chest. I couldn't see the face, but I could see the gloved hands, one of them gripping something metallic. A crowbar. My heart sank. This wasn't just someone trying to scare us. This was someone ready to hurt us. "Upstairs!" I shouted. "Go upstairs!" Claire yanked the children up the staircase, their little feet pounding against the wood. I turned, blocking the bottom of the stairs with my body, flashlight still clutched like a weapon. The figure stopped just a few feet away. We stared at each other, the silence heavier than any words. Then the stranger tilted its head slightly, almost mocking me, before raising the crowbar slowly in the air. I braced myself. But before it could strike, James groaned from the couch. He stirred, half-conscious, and muttered something incoherent. The figure turned its head toward him. That tiny distraction was enough. I swung the flashlight with every ounce of strength left in me. It cracked against the figure's shoulder. The stranger staggered back, cursing under its breath. "Go!" I screamed, racing up the stairs after Claire and the kids. We slammed the bedroom door shut and locked it. My chest heaved, my old body trembling violently. Claire was crying now, rocking her youngest child in her arms. The other two clung to my nightgown, eyes wide with terror. From downstairs came the sound of footsteps. Slow. Taunting. The figure was pacing the living room, dragging the crowbar along the wall. The scraping sound echoed up the staircase, chilling us to the bone. Scrape. Scrape. Every scrape felt like a promise. A promise that the stranger wasn't leaving until they had what they came for. Hours seemed to pass, though it was probably only minutes. My phone lay on the nightstand by the bed. Hands trembling, I picked it up, praying for a signal. To my relief, the bars lit up. I dialed 911, whispering desperately, "Please, someone is in my house. They've attacked my family. Please send help." The operator's calm voice tried to reassure me. "Ma'am, stay where you are. Units are on the way." But just as I spoke, a sound cut me off. It was the stranger's voice, right outside the bedroom door. "Calling the police won't save you, Grandma Maggie." I dropped the phone in shock. It clattered to the floor. The children screamed again. Claire slapped her hand over her mouth, sobbing silently. The figure laughed. A low, horrible laugh that made my skin crawl. And then silence. We listened. No footsteps. No scraping. Nothing. Claire whispered, "Maybe they left." But I knew better. I leaned against the door, pressing my ear to the wood. At first, I heard nothing. Then faintly the sound of a window sliding open. My stomach dropped. The figure wasn't leaving. It was finding another way in. Minutes crawled by. My nerves were stretched so thin that even the sound of my own heartbeat made me jump. Then suddenly, a crash from the bathroom window. Shards of glass scattered across the hallway. The figure was inside again. Upstairs with us. Claire let out a strangled sob. The children wailed louder. My instincts took over. I grabbed the old jewelry box from the nightstand, heavy wooden with sharp corners, and held it tight. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped, right outside the bedroom. The doorknob rattled violently. Then a voice hissed, "You can't hide from me." The children screamed. Claire covered their ears, tears streaming down her face. My own knees buckled, but I forced myself to stand tall. The lock on the door began to crack. Once, twice. With each slam of the crowbar, the door splintered more. I raised the jewelry box high, my whole body shaking. I knew that the moment the door gave way, I would have to fight. The wood split wider with a deafening crack. The figure's hand reached through the gap, groping for the lock. I swung the jewelry box with all my strength, smashing it against the hand. The figure roared in pain, yanking it back. But I knew it wouldn't stop them for long. The children sobbed. Claire screamed my name. And then, the sound of sirens cut through the night. Police cars. Flashing red and blue lights glowed faintly through the cracks in the curtains. The figure cursed loudly, footsteps retreating fast down the hallway. A window shattered again. Silence followed. Relief washed over me like a wave. But it was short-lived. Because when the police finally entered the house and searched every corner, they found no one. The figure had vanished. Not a trace left behind. Except for one thing. On the kitchen table, where the Father's Day card had been left, there was now a second card. This one said, "Next time, Grandma Maggie, the police won't save you." There it was. A second card, lying right on the kitchen table, as if someone had carefully placed it there while the police were in the house. My hands shook as I reached for it, my breath catching in my throat. The bold black letters on the front sent a chill down my spine. For Grandma Maggie. I opened it slowly, my eyes blurring with fear. Inside, written in jagged handwriting, were the words that nearly made me drop to my knees. "Next time, the police won't save you." My daughter gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered, clutching her children tighter. James, pale and weak on the couch, groaned as if he understood, even in his half-conscious state. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them could explain how the card got there. One officer, tall and serious-looking, asked me, "Ma'am, are you sure no one in this house knows the person behind these threats?" I shook my head quickly. "I swear I don't know. But they know me. They know my name. They keep calling me Grandma Maggie." Claire turned on me sharply, her face red with fear and anger. "So it is about you. This person isn't after us. They're after you. You've dragged all of us into this mess." Her words pierced me deeper than the card itself. I wanted to argue, to remind her of everything I had given up for her and her family, but my throat tightened. I stayed quiet, though the pain inside me burned. The officer spoke again. "We'll have a patrol car watch the neighborhood tonight. But ma'am, I need you to think carefully. Is there anyone from your past who might hold a grudge? Anyone you had a conflict with?" My mind swirled. Faces from my younger years flashed in my head. Old neighbors, friends I'd lost touch with, even distant relatives. But none of them seemed capable of this. Still, deep in my heart, I had a gnawing feeling. This wasn't random. Whoever it was, they had been planning this for a long time. The officers left after checking every door and window twice. Claire locked the doors herself, muttering angrily under her breath. The children wouldn't leave my side, their tiny arms wrapped around me. James lay in the living room, drifting in and out of consciousness. The house finally grew quiet again, though the air was thick with unease. I sat at the dining table, the two cards laid out before me like cruel trophies. I stared at them for hours, searching for a clue. Anything. But the only thing I found was the sound of my own heartbeat, heavy and restless. Later that night, when everyone had finally fallen into a restless sleep, I sat alone by the window. The moonlight cast shadows across the yard. My eyes scanned every tree, every corner, waiting for movement. That's when I saw it. A reflection. Far across the street, near the neighbor's fence, a faint glint of metal caught the moonlight. I squinted, and then I saw him. The hooded figure. He was standing completely still, just watching the house. My stomach twisted. He wanted me to see him. I rushed to wake the officers in the patrol car outside, but by the time they followed me back to the window, he was gone. Again. It was like chasing a shadow. The next morning was worse. The police left, saying they would increase patrols. James had to be taken to the hospital to check his head injury. Claire barely looked at me, her jaw tight with resentment. "Do you see what's happening, Mom?" she hissed when the kids were out of earshot. "This person wants you, not us. You're the reason my children are scared to sleep in their own house. Maybe it's better if you leave." Her words shattered me. I wanted to scream, to tell her she was wrong, that none of this was my fault, that I had only ever tried to protect her, to protect all of them. But I stayed silent, because in her eyes I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a burden, just like the first cruel card had said. That afternoon I packed my small suitcase. Claire didn't stop me. She didn't even say goodbye. The only ones who cried were my grandchildren, their little arms clinging to me as if they knew this might be the last time they saw me safe. I kissed their foreheads, forcing a smile. "Grandma will be back soon," I lied. "Be brave, my loves." Then I walked out of the house, my suitcase rattling behind me, my heart heavy with despair. I went to stay in an old friend's empty cabin on the edge of town. It was small, quiet, and far from anyone else. I thought maybe there, at least, I would be safe. The first night passed in silence. For the first time in days, I slept. But on the second night, I woke to a sound that made my blood run cold. Ding. It was my phone. A new message. From unknown number. With trembling hands, I unlocked it. The message was short. "You can't run from me, Grandma Maggie. I know where you are." I gasped, dropping the phone onto the wooden floor. My hands covered my mouth as the reality sank in. They had followed me. And just as the thought settled in my head, there was a knock. On the cabin door. Slow. Heavy. Familiar. Knock, knock, knock. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the tiny cabin like thunder, rattling the loose windows and vibrating in my bones. I froze. My heart slammed so violently that it felt like it might break through my chest. My phone was still lying on the wooden floor, the last message glowing on the screen. "I know where you are." The knock came again. Louder. Slower. More deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. I backed away from the door, my legs trembling so badly I could barely stand. My mind screamed at me to run, but where would I go? I was miles from town, alone, surrounded by trees and silence. There was nowhere to escape. I whispered to myself, "Stay calm, Maggie, stay calm." But my voice shook too much to believe my own words. The knock stopped. Silence. That silence was worse than the sound itself. Stretched on, suffocating. I didn't know if the stranger was still out there, waiting, or if he had already slipped inside. I grabbed the heavy iron fireplace poker and held it tight in my hand. It was the only weapon I had. Then I heard it. The sound of footsteps. Not at the door. Not outside. Inside. Above me. On the roof. I gasped, nearly dropping the poker. The boards creaked overhead, slow and steady, as if someone was crawling across the cabin roof, circling like a predator. My breath came in sharp gasps. My knees wobbled. I clutched the poker so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the night. The small window in the kitchen burst open, glass raining down across the floor. I screamed. A gloved hand reached inside, fumbling for the latch. "No!" I shouted, running forward. With every ounce of strength in my old body, I swung the poker against the arm. The metal cracked against bone with a sickening thud. The hand recoiled instantly, vanishing into the night. I stumbled back, gasping for air, my chest heaving. My ears rang with the echo of the strike. Then silence again. The woods outside grew eerily still, not even a cricket chirping. I waited. Minutes dragged on like hours. but no more sounds came. Finally, exhausted and shaking, I slumped into the chair by the table. My hands wouldn't let go of the poker. My eyes never left the broken window. I sat there until morning, too terrified to close my eyes. When dawn finally broke, the woods looked calm, almost peaceful, as if nothing had happened. But the broken glass scattered across the floor reminded me it wasn't a dream. With trembling hands, I cleaned it up and nailed a piece of plywood over the window. But my fear only grew heavier. Whoever was stalking me wasn't going to stop. They knew where I lived. They knew where I ran. And they had the patience of a hunter. Later that day, I turned on the small old TV in the cabin. The news was running. And what I saw nearly made my heart stop. The reporter stood in front of a crime scene. Flashing lights, yellow tape, officers everywhere. A local family was targeted last night, the reporter said. A break-in attempt at the home of Claire Thompson. Police confirmed that an unidentified suspect tried to gain entry, but fled the scene after leaving behind another threatening note. Neighbors say the suspect appeared to be wearing a black hood. I dropped the remote. My blood ran cold. Claire. My daughter. He had gone back for them. Tears welled in my eyes. I thought leaving the house would protect them. I thought taking the danger with me would keep them safe. But I was wrong. He wanted all of us. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. Claire answered on the second ring. Her voice panicked and raw. Mom, where are you? Are you okay? I'm safe, I whispered, though I wasn't sure it was true. I saw the news. Are the children all right? They're scared out of their minds, she sobbed. The police are here, but Mom, the note he left. Her voice broke. What did it say? I asked, my throat dry. She whispered the words that sent shivers crawling down my spine. Bring Grandma Maggie back. Or we'll take one of the children instead. My knees buckled. The poker slipped from my hand, clattering against the floor. He doesn't just want me, I whispered. He wants to destroy everything I love. Claire's voice trembled. What do we do, Mom? What do we do? I didn't know. I had no answers. Only fear. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't hide anymore. That night I made a decision. I would go back to Claire's house. If this stalker wanted me so badly, then I would face him. Better me than my grandchildren. I packed my small bag, my hands steady now with grim resolve. Fear still burned in my chest, but the love for my family burned hotter. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the woods whispered around me. Every shadow looked like a figure. Every sound made me jump. The drive back to town felt endless. The road stretched on, empty and dark, my headlights the only light in the blackness. Then out of nowhere, I saw it. A figure standing by the roadside. Hood pulled low, head tilted, watching me. My breath caught. My foot pressed harder on the gas, but as my car flew past, I saw it clearly in the rearview mirror. The stranger was holding something in his hand. A small stuffed bear. One of my grandchildren's toys. The moment I saw the bear dangling from the stranger's hand, my stomach twisted into knots. My grandchild's toy. A soft, worn little bear with a red bow I had bought for Emily's 3rd birthday. It wasn't possible. How could he have it? My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles ached. My foot pressed harder on the gas. I wanted to stop, to scream, to confront him, but fear kept me moving. Faster. Faster. In my rearview mirror, I saw him raise his free hand, slowly waving at me as though mocking my terror. Then the darkness swallowed him up as I sped down the road. I couldn't breathe. My chest heaved. My thoughts tangled in panic. If he had Emily's bear, did that mean he had been inside Claire's house again? By the time I reached the outskirts of town, tears blurred my eyes. I pulled over, my whole body trembling. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and whispered to myself, think, Maggie. Think. I couldn't run forever. Hiding had failed. The stalker had grown bolder, taunting me, threatening my family. And now he wanted me back at the house. I knew it was a trap. But I also knew one thing. If I didn't face him, my grandchildren were in danger. I started the engine again, forcing my fear into the back of my mind. I had to be strong. For them. When I pulled into Claire's driveway, police cars were still parked outside. Blue and red lights flickered across the neighborhood. Officers stood guard. talking quietly among themselves. Claire rushed out the door the moment she saw my car. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "Mom!" she shouted, running toward me. "You shouldn't be here." Before she could finish, she froze. Her eyes widened. "What's that on your windshield?" she whispered. Confused, I turned my head, and my blood ran cold. Stuck to the glass with black tape was a photograph. It showed me standing in the cabin window last night, clutching the poker in my hand. He had been watching me. Even there. Even in the woods. Claire covered her mouth, gasping. "Oh my God, Mom." A police officer rushed over, carefully peeling the photograph off the glass. He studied it, then gave me a grim look. "He's playing with you. And he's close. Too close." I sank onto the porch steps, my legs too weak to hold me. My whole body shook with fear, but also with rage. Whoever this man was, he wasn't just a stranger. He knew me. He was always one step ahead. But why? Why me? The officers increased their patrols around the house. 2 of them stayed inside through the night, while others circled the block. Claire insisted I sleep in the spare room, but I couldn't close my eyes. I sat by the window, staring into the dark, waiting for the hooded figure to appear. The night dragged on. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every gust of wind against the shutters sent chills crawling up my spine. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. Another message. "Did you like the picture, Maggie? I have more. Much more. Look outside." My heart froze. Hands trembling, I pulled back the curtain and peered into the yard. At first, I saw nothing. Just shadows and trees swaying. Then my blood turned to ice. Across the street, in the beam of a streetlight, photographs were strung up on a wire like laundry. Dozens of them, fluttering in the breeze. Photos of me. Photos of Claire. Photos of my grandchildren. Some old. Some new. Some taken just hours ago. I staggered back from the window, my chest heaving. "He's watching us," I whispered. "Right now." The police rushed outside, ripping the photos down, but whoever had put them there was already gone. The children woke up crying from the noise. Claire held them close, sobbing quietly as she rocked them in her arms. I stood in the doorway, feeling powerless, guilty, and furious all at once. I wanted to protect them, but the more I tried, the closer the danger crept. By morning, the police decided to move us into temporary protective custody. They wanted us safe in a secure location until they figured out who the stalker was. I should have felt relieved, but instead, my stomach churned with dread, because deep down, I knew something the police didn't. This wasn't random. This wasn't just a madman choosing a victim. This was personal. And the person behind it wasn't going to stop until he had me. We were escorted to a safe house on the edge of town. A small, plain building with covered windows and locked doors. Officers stood guard outside. Inside, everything felt sterile and strange. Claire tried to keep the children calm, playing board games and reading stories, but the fear in their eyes couldn't be hidden. That evening, while everyone else was distracted, I sat in the corner and scrolled back through my phone messages. I studied every word the stalker had written. There was something in the way he spoke, something that scratched at the back of my memory. The words felt familiar. Then it hit me. Years ago, I had worked as a teacher at the local elementary school. One of my students had been a troubled boy named Daniel. Angry, unpredictable, always lashing out. I had tried to help him, but he would write cruel little rhymes and leave them on my desk. Rhymes that always started the same way. Roses are red, violets are blue. My stomach dropped. Could it be him? But Daniel had left town years ago. I hadn't seen him since. Still, the thought gnawed at me. Before I could think further, my phone buzzed again. I glanced down. Another message. "You can hide in your safe house, but walls mean nothing to me. Tonight, I'll prove it." I looked up, my throat tightening. The message wasn't the worst part. It was the picture attached. A photo of me sitting exactly where I was at that moment. Inside the safe house. The picture on my phone screen made my blood run cold. It wasn't an old photo. It wasn't a trick. It was me sitting right there in the safe house, the very same chair, the very same angle. That meant only one thing. He was here. Inside. The phone trembled in my hands. My voice cracked as I whispered, "Claire! Claire, get the children." She looked up, confused at first, then her face turned pale when she saw my expression. Without a word, she gathered Emily and Jacob into her arms and hurried them to the far corner. I showed the nearest officer the message. His jaw tightened, and he immediately barked into his radio. "All units, possible breach inside. Lock down every exit." The other officers sprang into action, checking doors, sweeping hallways, securing windows. Their boots pounded against the wooden floor, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. The man wasn't outside. He was here with us, watching, waiting. Minutes dragged by. No sign of him. No broken locks. No forced windows. The officers insisted the place was secure. But my phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time, of Claire rocking Emily in her arms. Taken just seconds earlier. I screamed. "He's in here. He's watching us right now." The officers swept the house again, tearing open closets, crawling into the crawl space, searching every inch. But they found nothing. "Ma'am, there's no one here," one officer said firmly, though his eyes betrayed unease. He could be using a remote camera, maybe some kind of hidden surveillance equipment. "We'll find it." But I wasn't convinced. My gut screamed the truth. He was here, and he was playing with us. That night, no one slept. The officers rotated shifts, guarding the door. Claire sat in the corner with the children, trying to soothe them, but her hands shook too much to hide her fear. I stayed awake, clutching my phone, waiting for the next message. It came at 2:17 a.m. A short video clip. My heart nearly stopped when I pressed play. The camera showed a view of me lying in the bed of the safe house guest room. Asleep, my chest rising and falling. But the clip wasn't from tonight. It was from years ago. Because in the video, the bedspread was different. The curtains were different. And on the nightstand sat a clock I hadn't seen in over a decade. This wasn't the safe house. This was my old bedroom. The one from my house. Back then, when my husband was still alive. My throat tightened. Tears blurred my vision. He had been watching me for years. Years. I dropped the phone as though it burned me. My chest heaved with panic. All this time, every laugh, every tear, every private moment I thought was mine alone. He had been there unseen recording. Claire rushed over, gripping my shoulders. "Mom, what is it? What did he send?" I shook my head, unable to speak. The words wouldn't leave my throat. The officers tried to access the video, but before they could, my phone screen went black. Dead. The timing was no accident. He wanted me to know he had more. And he controlled when I saw it. The next day, the police decided to move us again. This time under heavier security. But as we prepared to leave, something happened that froze me in my tracks. Jacob, my grandson, tugged at my sleeve. His big brown eyes were wide with confusion. "Grandma," he whispered. "Why is the man with the hood standing in the hallway?" I whipped around so fast my neck cracked. The hallway was empty. "Where, Jacob? Where did you see him?" I demanded. He pointed at the end of the hall. Right there. He was smiling at me. But his teeth looked wrong. Like they were too sharp. My knees went weak. I had to hold on to the wall to steady myself. The officers insisted no one was there. They searched again, found nothing. But I believed Jacob. Children see things adults ignore. And if Jacob had seen him inside, then it meant the stalker was no longer hiding his presence. He wanted us to know he could come and go as he pleased. We were finally escorted into an armored van, flanked by 2 patrol cars. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could get somewhere safe. The van rattled down the road. The children dozed in Claire's arms. The officers remained alert, scanning the dark streets. But halfway across the bridge leading out of town, the van shuddered to a stop. The engine cut out. The lights flickered and died. We were plunged into darkness. The driver cursed, trying to restart the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. The radio crackled with static. Then, through the windshield, I saw him. The hooded man stood in the center of the bridge, illuminated by the moonlight. In one hand, he held a large black bag. In the other, He dragged something heavy across the concrete. At first, I couldn't make out what it was. Then the moonlight hit it. A coffin. He was dragging a coffin straight toward us. And scrawled across the lid in bright red paint were the words, "For Grandma Maggie." The sight of that coffin sent ice through my veins. My breath caught in my throat, and my body froze like stone. The hooded man dragged it closer, the scraping sound echoing off the steel beams of the bridge. Each screech of wood against concrete felt like nails tearing across my soul. One officer raised his weapon and shouted, "Stop where you are! Drop it!" But the hooded man didn't stop. He tilted his head slowly, as if amused, and kept dragging the coffin toward us. The van was still dead. The engine wouldn't turn over. We were trapped, boxed in by the stalled patrol cars behind us. The officers fumbled with their radios, but the static drowned every word. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. The hooded man reached the middle of the bridge, then stopped. Slowly, he crouched down and pried open the coffin lid. The squeal of rusty hinges echoed like a scream. Inside was not what I expected. It wasn't empty. It wasn't filled with dirt. It was filled with photographs. Hundreds of them. Thousands maybe. Photos of me. Photos of Claire. Photos of my grandchildren. Some black and white. Some recent. Some so old I had forgotten they existed. My wedding day. Claire's first steps. Jacob's birth. All of it. Our whole lives lay bare inside a coffin. The hooded man reached inside, pulled out a single photograph, and held it up high for us to see. Even from the van I recognized it instantly. It was a photo of me taken just last night, sleeping in the safe house. I screamed, pounding on the van's door. "He's been inside with us. He's been inside the safe house." The officers moved quickly, trying to exit the van, but the doors jammed. The locks refused to click open. The hooded man tilted his head again. Then slowly, he raised one finger to his lips in a mocking gesture. Suddenly the bridge lights flickered. Then one by one they went out. Darkness swallowed everything. I could still hear the scrape of the coffin sliding closer and closer, until it reached the side of the van. Then, a deafening bang shook the vehicle. The side of the van dented inward as if something heavy had slammed against it. The children screamed. Claire clutched them tight, sobbing. Another bang. Louder. Closer. The hooded man was pounding the coffin against the van, trying to break in. The officers shouted, trying to break open the jammed doors. The driver slammed his fists on the ignition, praying for it to spark. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pounding stopped. Silence. A silence so thick it smothered us. I held my breath. My heart raced. My ears strained for any sound. Then, through the shattered quiet, came a low, eerie whistle. A tune I hadn't heard in decades. Roses are red, violets are blue. It wasn't just a rhyme anymore. It was a song. A twisted lullaby drifting in the dark. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't random. This was someone who had known me long ago. Someone who remembered the little songs I used to sing to my students, back when I was a teacher. My suspicion about Daniel, that troubled boy, returned with a vengeance. But before I could piece it together, the headlights of another vehicle flared in the distance. A massive truck roared onto the bridge. Its horn blared. The hooded man vanished into the shadows, leaving the coffin behind. The truck screeched to a stop, its beams illuminating the scattered photographs across the concrete. The officers finally forced open the van doors, guns drawn, but there was no one to shoot. The hooded man was gone, but his message remained. I climbed shakily out of the van, staring down at the coffin. My reflection trembled in the glossy surface of the photos inside. My whole life had been collected, catalogued, and placed in a box meant for the grave, and it had my name on it. We were escorted off the bridge under heavy guard, but the sense of safety was gone. No matter where we went, he would follow. Back at the precinct, the police tried to calm us. They promised new measures, more protection, a bigger investigation. But none of their words reached me. I could still hear the whistle in my ears. I could still see the coffin filled with our lives. And worst of all, I could still feel his eyes on me even now. That night, after the children finally fell asleep at the precinct's safe room, I sat alone with my thoughts. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't hide behind officers, locked doors, or false hopes. He wanted me. Only me. If I didn't face him, he would keep coming. He would destroy everyone I loved, piece by piece, memory by memory. For the first time in my life, I felt something stronger than fear. Anger. Pure, burning anger. I was tired of being hunted. Tired of being mocked. Tired of being turned into prey. If he wanted me so badly, then he would get me. But not as a victim. As a trap. I made up my mind. The next time he came for me, I would be ready. But before I could even begin planning, my phone lit up again. No words this time. No video. No photograph. Just a single live feed. I hesitated, then tapped it. The screen filled with grainy night vision footage. My stomach dropped. It showed Emily's bedroom. Her small body curled up beneath the blanket, breathing softly in sleep. And then, a gloved hand reached into the frame. Slowly, gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The live feed stopped my heart. On the small square of my phone screen in grainy green night vision, I watched my granddaughter Emily sleep. Her little chest rose and fell. Her stuffed bear lay beside her. The room looked safe. It looked ordinary. But the next movement made my blood run cold. A gloved hand slipped into the frame. It moved like it loved the child, soft, gentle, yet my skin crawled. The hand reached toward Emily's hair and brushed it away from her face. The camera stayed still like someone had set it there on purpose. Someone watching. Someone close. I slammed my phone down. The officers at the precinct jumped. Claire's body froze, her eyes wide with a terror I had never seen on her before. She grabbed the phone, hands shaking, and replayed the feed. The same scene played over. The hand. The blanket. Emily breathing in her sleep unaware. The detective who had been on our case turned the phone toward the others. "This feed is live," he said, voice low. "We've traced the signal to a small range. He's nearby. He's inside the neighborhood." That simple phrase, "he's inside the neighborhood," landed like a stone in my chest. He was so close he could have stepped into the room at any moment. "Lock everything down," the detective ordered. "We'll sweep the houses again. Nobody goes home alone." But Claire had already gone pale. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Emily," she whispered, as though the name would bring the child back to her. I felt something break inside me. All my fear and shame, the cold card, the mocking whistle, the coffin full of our memories. It all narrowed into one sharp thing. Protect the baby. Protect them all. We left the precinct in a blur. Police cars raced toward our street. Flashing lights threw strange colors on the houses. The neighborhood felt wrong, like a stage where something terrible was about to happen. When we arrived, officers rushed past us with flashlights and radios. They went door to door, asking frantic questions, checking windows. The house next door was already crowded with officers. Dogs barked. Shouts cut through the night. We stood in the street and watched them hurry. The detective took my arm gently. "We need you to tell us everything you remember about anyone who might wish you harm. Any names, faces, places. Even small things matter." I told him about Daniel, the troubled boy from my classroom years ago. The one who wrote cruel rhymes and stayed after class, eyes full of hurt. I told him about the hooded figure I'd seen by my fence before Father's Day. I told him about the man in the truck on the bridge, and the photographs, and the coffin. The words tumbled out of me like stones. The detective listened with a hard face. "We'll look into Daniel's file," he said. "We'll trace any connection. Right now, our priority is Emily." They took Claire and Emily into the house while a team of officers swept each room. I held my breath as I watched them open the bedroom door. Emily sat up in bed, hair mussed, eyes sleepy. She stared at the officers as if she had only woken from a bad dream. Claire ran to her, hugging her so hard I thought the girl would disappear inside her mother's arms. Officers checked the windows, the closet, under the bed. Nothing. No sign of an intruder. No footprints. No hidden camera. Just Joey, the family dog, asleep at the foot of the bed, snoring. I wanted to collapse with relief. But the detective, through a radio speaker, said something that made the relief freeze. "One of the cameras in the neighborhood picked up heat signatures around this house 5 minutes before the live feed started," he said. "We saw a figure on the street. Then it disappeared. We're still tracking. My knees went weak. If he could step away from a camera and vanish, what else could he do? We sat in the living room with the officers. They asked questions, took notes, told us not to panic. But panic had already soaked into our bones. That night I could not sleep. Even with the police presence, I felt hunted. When midnight came, my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my chair. Another message. No picture this time. Just words. You keep them close, Maggie. That makes it more fun. My hands went cold. I wanted to throw the phone into the fireplace. I wanted to run and hide under my old quilt and pretend none of this was true. Instead, I stood up and walked outside into the small backyard. The moon was thin, a pale sliver. Shadows stretched across the fence. For a moment, a wind pushed through the trees and the sound of leaves made me feel less alone. But the wind did not last. I thought of the coffin on the bridge, its lid full of photos of my life. I thought of the card that called me a burden. I thought of the way Claire had laughed when she gave me that card. A laugh that still shook me. How had things gone so wrong? How had I become the center of someone's vengeance? As dawn approached, officers began sorting photos and files on the living room table. They found something odd. An old newspaper clippings collection tucked in among the photographs that had been hung across the street. The clippings were about my teaching days. A young teacher named Margaret Mason who had saved a child from a bully. Pictures of my school, my classes, a small article about a teacher who refused to give up on a troubled boy. Do you remember that? An officer asked me. This will be useful. I nodded, though my stomach hurt. Yes, I remembered a little boy named Daniel. He had been angry and secretive. I had tried to help him with math and with reading and with the way he wrote short sad rhymes. Once I had read one aloud to the class, roses and violets and a bite of cold humor hidden inside. I had thought it was a cry for help. I was wrong. They brought me to the station the next day to look at old school records. An officer sat with me and clicked through files. He found a name among the old reports. Daniel Harker. He had been dismissed from the district years ago after a string of incidents. Then he had disappeared from town. Some said he went to live with his aunt in another state. Others said he left for the city. No one had heard from him in years. But now, the detective told me, someone had tracked a phone number that pinged near our neighborhood last night. The number belonged to an address 2 miles away, an old warehouse on the east side, abandoned for years. Officers suited up and requested a search warrant. I asked if I could go. I wanted to stand at the warehouse door and tell whoever waited inside, I am not a burden. You cannot hurt my family. They said no. They needed to move fast. I tried to argue, but the detective placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Stay here, he said. You being here gives them less to use. Let us do our job. While they prepared to raid the warehouse, Claire sat with the children in the living room. She leaned into me for the first time since the card and sobbed quietly. Her anger had peeled away like old wallpaper to reveal fear and shame. She whispered, I'm sorry I said those things, Mom. I didn't know. Her apology felt like rain on dry soil. I told her it was okay. That I loved her. That I would always protect her. When the officers returned, the mood in the house changed. They had found the warehouse empty. No suspects. No cameras. But in one corner, a chair was set with a small pile of items. A child's drawing, a scrap of fabric from Emily's first dress, and a single photograph of me, as if someone had wanted to leave a mark and then move on. On top of the pile was a note in jagged handwriting. You're getting better at hiding, Maggie, but the game is far from over. Those words burned. I felt like someone had peeled open my chest and left the rawness to the night wind. That night, officers suggested we move to another safe location, further away. A larger facility with stronger locks. We agreed. As the convoy pulled away, I looked out the window and watched the house grow smaller. A small light blinked in a neighbor's window. For a second I thought I saw a hooded shape slide between 2 trees at the far edge of the yard. A trick of light, the detective said later. But my knees felt weak again. At the safe facility, the detective showed me a new piece of evidence. He placed a small old cassette tape on the table. The tape was labeled in faded ink, Songs for D. He put it into an old player and pressed play. From the worn speakers came a small child's voice singing the rhyme I had taught in class decades ago. Roses are red, violets are blue. Then a low humming and a voice whispering. Do you remember me, Mrs. Mason? Do you remember my rhymes? My hands trembled. It was not just Daniel's words I heard. It was a voice I vaguely recognized from the past. A voice that once had anger but also pain. The detective looked up at me. We pulled records on Daniel Harker, he said. He had family nearby, but none of them admit to seeing him. We have no recent photo of him. He's a ghost. A ghost can still leave a trail, I said. He could have helped himself to cameras, radios, phones. He knows our habits. He nodded. We're building profiles. We'll put more guards on the houses. We'll trace the live feeds and jam them. But Maggie, we need your help remembering. Any detail about Daniel could help us find him. So I told them everything. The way he chewed his lip when he was nervous, the cold laugh he used sometimes, the name of the hardware store his family visited, the teacher who once tried to adopt him for a time and failed. Each tiny memory felt like a breadcrumb leading out of a forest. That night, before the children slept, Claire asked me to tell them a story. She wanted a normal thing. A bedtime tale about the silly cat who lived on our porch. I told it, voice small but steady. The children smiled. And for a moment the night felt like it used to, like a warm blanket. After they fell asleep, I took one last look at them. Emily's face was soft and peaceful. I pressed my forehead to the glass of her bedroom window and whispered, "Not on my watch." My phone buzzed one last time that night. I opened it with trembling hands. A photo filled the screen. It was Emily's stuffed bear, the very bear I had seen the hooded man hold at the roadside. The bear sat on a bench in the park by the bridge where the coffin had been left. Beside it was a small folded card. I opened the card with numb fingers. Come alone, Margaret Mason. Midnight. The bridge. Bring only yourself. My blood ran cold. The invitation was a dare. A trap. Promise. I thought of running, of calling the officers, of refusing. But I heard my granddaughter breathe softly in the next room, and I knew I could not let fear decide. I tucked the phone into my coat, kissed Claire on the forehead and told her I would be careful. She looked at me with such trust and fear that my heart broke and healed at once. At midnight, under a moon who had watched all our secrets, I walked toward the bridge where he had left the coffin. The road was empty. The river below whispered its monotone song. My palms were wet with sweat, but my steps were steady. As I stepped onto the bridge, the wind curled around me, and I heard the faintest rustle behind. Something slid across the boards at my feet, soft paper maybe, and my phone buzzed one last message. Bring only yourself. Then from the darkness under the bridge, a voice I thought I had forgotten smiled into the night and said, very softly, very clearly, "Hello, Mrs. Mason. I've been waiting a long time." The bridge felt alive that night. Every board creaked under my feet as if it remembered all the years I had crossed it. Carrying groceries, pushing strollers, walking to the market. Now it carried me to something darker. A meeting that felt less like chance and more like destiny. The voice drifted up from beneath the bridge, calm and deliberate. Each syllable stretched like the sound of chalk scraping across a board. "Hello, Mrs. Mason. I've been waiting a long time." My breath caught. That voice was older than the boy I remembered, roughened by time. Yet it carried the same strange rhythm, the pause before the punch, the hidden music of a rhyme waiting to be spoken. I leaned over the wooden rail. Shadows shifted below, too deep for my eyes to pierce. The water lapped gently against the supports, hiding whoever stood beneath. Daniel. My voice cracked. I hadn't spoken his name aloud in years. Silence. Then laughter, low, bitter, broken. You do remember. Good. I wondered if I'd been erased like the chalk marks you wiped from your boards. My heart beat hard against my ribs. Why are you doing this? Why my family? The figure stepped forward at last, out of the dark. He wore a long coat, hood down, face half hidden by shadows. But I saw enough. The sharp chin, the hollow cheeks, the restless eyes that never seemed to stop flicking from side to side. Older, yes. Worn. But Daniel all the same. He held something in his hands, Emily's bear. Its fur looked ragged. A button eye dangling by a thread. He stroked it absently like a pet. You gave me words, Mrs. Mason, he said, his tone almost tender. Do you know what words are for? They're weapons. You hand them out to children like sweets, but to some of us, they cut. I learned early how to make them cut back. I remembered then the first rhyme he had written on the corner of his homework. Roses are red, violets are blue. You laugh at me now, but I'll laugh at you. At the time, I thought it was childish spite. Now I saw it for what it was, prophecy. I swallowed. Daniel, whatever you think I did to you, whatever pain you carry, it doesn't have to be this way. You can stop. He shook his head slowly. No, Mrs. Mason. You taught me the power of stories. You made me invisible when you chose others to protect. Now I write my own story, and every story needs an ending. He lifted the bear and squeezed it. From its torn side slipped a thin metal blade, glinting under the moonlight. My blood turned to ice. Your family sleeps while you walk alone to meet me, he said softly. You followed the rules. That pleases me. Tonight, I only wanted you. The way he said only you chilled me. It was not just a threat, it was an obsession. I forced myself to stand tall, though my knees shook. If it's me you want, then leave them out of it. Leave Emily, leave Claire. They have done nothing to you. He tilted his head, like a bird considering prey. And yet don't you see? Hurting them hurts you more. That's the lesson, Mrs. Mason. The one you never taught me. Behind him, the river whispered, carrying away his words. I felt a surge of anger. Not fear, anger. He had stalked my home, poisoned my family with dread, invaded my granddaughter's sleep. I had carried guilt for years, thinking I had failed him as a teacher. But now I saw the truth. Daniel was no child left behind. He was a man who had chosen his darkness. My fists clenched. You want an ending, Daniel? Then look at me. I am not afraid of you. For the first time his restless eyes paused. The blade wavered slightly in his hand. Something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe even doubt. Then headlights exploded across the bridge. Police cars. The detective's voice cut through the night. Drop it, Harker. Step away. Daniel snarled. His spell over the night shattered. He stepped back toward the shadows, clutching the bear, his gaze never leaving mine. This isn't finished, he hissed. Every rhyme needs its last line. I'll write yours when the time is right. And before the officers could reach him, he vanished into the darkness beneath the bridge, swallowed by the river's song. I stood frozen, heart hammering, until strong hands guided me back toward the flashing lights. The detective looked at me, his face drawn tight. You shouldn't have come alone, he said. I wiped at my trembling lips. I had to. He wanted me, not them. He nodded grimly. Now we know who we're dealing with. But he's clever. He'll slip again. We'll need you, Mrs. Mason. You're the key to stopping him. As they led me to the car, I turned back once more. The bridge stood silent, but in my ears I still heard his whisper. Every story needs an ending. And I knew mine was only beginning. The precinct buzzed like a hive when we returned. Phones rang, officers barked orders, radios crackled with static-laced chatter. But through it all I felt like I was underwater, every sound dulled, every movement blurred. I sat in a chair at the corner of the room, hands shaking, replaying Daniel's face over and over again. Older, angrier, more broken, but unmistakable. The boy I once taught, the boy who scribbled rhymes in the margins, had become the man who now hunted me. The detective crouched down in front of me, his eyes steady. Mrs. Mason, I need you to walk me through everything you remember about Daniel Harker. Every detail. Even the ones that seem small. I took a deep breath. My throat was dry, but I forced the words out. He was quiet. Always quiet. The other children teased him, but he never fought back. Not with fists. With words. He'd write little verses, dark ones. I thought he was just imaginative. Imaginative. The detective raised an eyebrow. I nodded slowly. Yes. But sometimes when I read them I felt a chill. Like he wasn't just playing with rhymes, he was bleeding into them. I told him about the time Daniel wrote a verse about fire. Then a week later the trash bin behind the school burned. About the rhyme that mentioned broken glass. And the next day the classroom window shattered. The detective scribbled notes furiously. Did you report any of this back then? Shame washed over me. I shook my head. No. I thought he needed kindness, not punishment. I thought I could reach him if I just gave him enough attention. The detective closed his notebook. You weren't wrong to try. But some kids are already walking a darker path. I pressed my palms together, trembling. And now he's back. And he's not a boy anymore. Days blurred together after that. The police set up patrols around our safe house. Officers shadowed my every move. Claire and the children were relocated again, this time to a place I wasn't told about, for their safety and mine. But the safety felt thin. Fragile. Because the phone calls never stopped. 60 the first day. 80 the next. Sometimes they were just silence. Sometimes they were static. And sometimes it was his voice, reciting twisted versions of the rhymes I used to teach. Roses are red, violets are blue. Your walls are thick, but I still see you. The detectives traced every call, but Daniel was slippery. He used burners, spoofed numbers, left no trail. It was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. At night, I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed of coffins filled with photographs, of Emily's bare bleeding stuffing, of Daniel's eyes in the dark. One evening, after another long day of police interviews, I sat by the window of the safe house. The street outside was empty, washed in yellow lamplight. For a moment, I thought maybe I could breathe. Then I saw it. A piece of paper, folded neatly, slipped under the door. My heart lurched. Hands trembling, I picked it up and unfolded it. It was a poem. In Daniel's handwriting. The teacher forgets, but the student recalls. Every slight, every silence, every locked hall. You gave them the sun, but you gave me the rain. Now I'll give back the lesson in sorrow and pain. The letters swam before my eyes. He had been here. Inside the perimeter. Past the guards. Past the locks. My phone buzzed at that exact moment. A new message. I opened it with dread curdling my stomach. It was a photo. Not of me. Not of Claire. Of Jacob. Standing at a playground I didn't recognize. His school bag at his feet. His head bent as if someone had called his name from behind the camera. I screamed. Officers rushed into the room, weapons drawn. I shoved the phone into the detective's hand, my whole body trembling. He went pale. This wasn't supposed to be possible. He shouldn't even know where the boy is. I grabbed his sleeve, desperation clawing through me. He does. He knows everything. You don't understand. Daniel is always one step ahead. He's writing this like a story, and we're all inside it. The detective barked orders into his radio, demanding teams check every relocation site. But I knew deep down that Daniel had already been there. The walls of safety we'd built were crumbling. And now my grandson was in his sights. The precinct roared to life, officers scrambling. But through the chaos I sat frozen, clutching the poem in my hands. Because at the bottom of the paper, beneath the verses, Daniel had written one final line. A date. And a time. Tomorrow. Midnight. The ending begins. Tomorrow. Midnight. Those words were burned into my eyes long after I crumpled the paper in my fist. No matter how many times I tried to steady my breath, the clock on the precinct wall ticked louder and louder, dragging me closer to that hour. The detective spread maps and photos across the table, his voice sharp, clipped. He wants you at a specific place, Mrs. Mason. He's escalating. He won't stop until he has you where he wants. I stared at the bold handwriting on the poem. Daniel's hand. Daniel's anger. My voice cracked. What if this isn't just about me anymore? What if he means to end all of us tomorrow? Claire sat across from me, pale as paper. Her hands twisted a tissue until it shredded into threads. I don't want you to go. If you meet him, you'll be walking straight into his trap. Her words sliced through me. She was right, but the truth pressed even heavier on my chest. And if I don't, he'll come after Jacob. After Emily. After you. He won't stop. The detective nodded grimly. She's right. This isn't a negotiation anymore. It's a showdown. The hours dragged. I tried to rest in the safe house room they gave me, but every sound made me flinch. The creak of a door. The hum of the air conditioner. My phone lighting up with another unknown number. At 11 p.m., I couldn't lie still any longer. I rose, dressed, and slipped the folded poem into my pocket. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. I would go. Not because Daniel demanded it. Because I needed to end this before he tore the last piece of my family apart. When I entered the main room, the detective was already waiting, jacket on, gun holstered. His eyes met mine, no words needed. He knew I wouldn't stay behind. Claire rushed forward, gripping my arms. Mom, please. Don't leave us like this. I cupped her cheek, forcing a smile I didn't feel. I'm not leaving. I'm protecting. The only way he stops is if I stand in front of him myself. Her tears fell hot against my hand. I held her one last time, then stepped into the night. The convoy rolled out at 11:30. 2 patrol cars in front, 2 behind, our van in the middle. The streets were dark, empty, as if the whole city held its breath. The detective sat beside me, his radio hissing with updates. Officers were already positioned at the meeting place, the abandoned fairgrounds outside town. A place once filled with children's laughter, now rotting with silence. Of course Daniel would choose it. By 11:55, the Ferris wheel rose against the horizon like a skeleton clawing at the sky. Its metal frame groaned in the wind, each creak echoing like a warning. The convoy stopped. Engines idled. The detective turned to me. Stay in the van until I give the signal. If anything feels wrong, we pull you out. I nodded, though every part of me knew there was no out. Daniel had written the chapter, and I had no choice but to step inside it. At 11:59 my phone buzzed. One new message. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a live video feed. Jacob. He was tied to one of the Ferris wheel cars, his small frame limp, head bowed. The camera panned slowly, deliberately, to show the rope cutting into his wrists. Then Daniel's voice, calm, cold. The ending begins. One of you walks away tonight. Choose carefully. The screen went black. The clock struck midnight. And from the shadows of the fairground, a figure stepped forward. Daniel. His blade glinting. His eyes locked on mine. The wind howled through the empty fairground, rattling rusted stalls and whispering through the broken carnival lights. I could barely breathe. My eyes locked on Jacob, limp in that Ferris wheel car, his small body dangling against the ropes. Every creak of the wheel made my stomach twist. Daniel stood beneath the wheel, his coat billowing, his eyes fixed on me as if nobody else existed. The officers spread out, weapons raised, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. The detective's voice thundered across the grounds. Daniel Harker. Step away from the boy. You're surrounded. But Daniel didn't move. He only smiled, a thin, eerie stretch of lips. Then he raised his voice, carrying over the wind. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about guns or cages. This is about her. He pointed the blade at me. Every rhyme needs its final reader. And tonight, Mrs. Mason, you read your last one. The officers edged closer. Daniel lifted his free hand, revealing a small black remote. My heart stopped. He tapped it lightly, almost playfully. One wrong move, and the Ferris wheel spins. Let's see how well your grandson hangs on. No. The word ripped from my throat before I even knew I'd spoken. Daniel's eyes gleamed. That's the spirit. Speak, Mrs. Mason. Let them hear your voice, the same voice that left me behind all those years. Tell them how you chose the golden children while I sat in the dark. The detective hissed at me under his breath. Don't engage him. He wants to pull you in. But how could I not? Jacob's life dangled in the balance, every second stretching like a blade against my chest. I took a step forward, raising my voice. Daniel, look at me. You don't need to hurt him. This is between you and me. He tilted his head, considering. The remote wavered in his hand. Then he began to speak in that sing-song voice, the one that had haunted me through calls, letters, poems. Roses are red. Violets are blue. One life for another. Now which will it be, him or you? My knees weakened. I felt the weight of every eye, every breath, every weapon aimed at the man who once scribbled rhymes in my classroom. I forced my voice steady. If you want me, you can have me. But let Jacob go. The detective grabbed my arm. Don't. I shook him off. It's the only way. If he doesn't get what he wants, he'll kill Jacob before you can blink. Daniel's smile widened. Finally, she understands. The teacher learns from the student. He stepped back, gesturing with the blade toward the Ferris wheel. Come forward, Mrs. Mason. Alone. The officers tensed, whispering into radios, but the detective's face hardened with helpless fury. He'll kill you the second you step closer. Maybe, I whispered, eyes never leaving Daniel. But if I don't, he'll kill Jacob. The fairground felt like it was holding its breath as I walked forward, each step echoing in the silence. My heart pounded, my palms slick with sweat. Daniel lowered the blade as I approached, his eyes locked on mine. That's better. The stage is set. The audience waits. I was only a few feet away when his smile faltered. His gaze flicked over my shoulder, toward the line of officers edging closer. And then his eyes hardened. He pressed the remote. The Ferris wheel groaned to life, gears screeching, lights flickering weakly. Jacob's car lurched forward, tilting. My grandson stirred, whimpering as the ropes tightened around him. I screamed, lunging forward. Stop! Daniel's laughter cut through the night. Every story ends with a fall. The Ferris wheel spun faster. Jacob's car rose higher and higher into the night. The Ferris wheel screamed like a dying beast, its gears grinding, its cars swaying violently in the night wind. My heart slammed against my ribs as Jacob's small body lifted higher, the ropes pulling tighter against his wrists. His muffled cries barely reached me, drowned by the clattering steel. Jacob! I screamed, sprinting forward, but the detective's arm locked around me, dragging me back. Don't. If you rush him, he'll drop the whole thing. His voice was sharp, desperate. Daniel stood at the base of the wheel, remote clutched in one hand, blade glinting in the other. His eyes danced with wild delight, like a boy pulling wings off flies. Do you hear it, Mrs. Mason? He shouted over the grinding. The wheel sings for him. For you. Round and round, until it all comes crashing down. I struggled against the detective's grip, tears burning my eyes. I have to go. He'll kill my grandson. Daniel's laughter echoed through the empty fairground. Then he began to chant, sing-song and cruel. Round goes the wheel, higher and higher. A teacher's regret fuels the fire. Choose now, Maggie, which life you'll defend. Your blood or his, how will this end? The Ferris wheel jolted. Jacob's car swung so hard I thought it would snap free. His small body thrashed weakly against the ropes, his voice breaking through the night. Grandma! Help! That single word shattered me. Without thinking, I tore free of the detective's hold and ran toward Daniel. Maggie, no, the detective bellowed. Daniel's smile widened as I came closer. Yes, come. Step into your chapter. I stopped just a few feet away, chest heaving. Let him down, Daniel. Please. He's just a child. He tilted his head, studying me like prey caught in a trap. So was I once. My voice cracked. Then don't make him suffer what you did. For the first time, Daniel's hand trembled on the remote. His eyes flickered, uncertain. Somewhere inside that broken man, the boy I once taught seemed to stir. But then the detective shouted orders, officers moving into position, rifles raised. The moment shattered. Daniel's face twisted in rage. No. She's mine. Not yours. He slammed the button. The Ferris wheel screamed louder, spinning faster, sparks flying from its ancient gears. Jacob's car jolted violently, the rope straining as the whole structure shuddered. Stop it. I lunged for Daniel's arm, grabbing the remote, struggling against him. He was stronger than I remembered, fueled by madness, by obsession. We wrestled in the dirt, his blade flashing inches from my face, the remote clutched between us. My arms burned, my breath ragged, but I held on with everything inside me. Above us, Jacob cried out, the car swinging wildly. The Ferris wheel groaned as if it might tear free from its foundation. Daniel snarled in my ear, his spit hot against my skin. Every ending has blood, Maggie. And tonight it's yours. The blade slashed downward, and the remote slipped from his grip, skidding across the dirt toward the detective. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Daniel's eyes widened. The detective dove. My scream tore through the night. And then the Ferris wheel gave a violent lurch, one of its supports snapping loose with a deafening crack. The whole structure leaned, tilting toward the ground. Jacob's car swinging high at the top. The wheel was coming down. The shriek of metal tearing filled the night as the Ferris wheel tilted further, groaning under its own weight. Sparks rained down like fireflies, and the entire fairground trembled as if the earth itself was rejecting the madness. Jacob! I screamed, my throat raw. Up above, my grandson dangled in the swaying car, his little arms thrashing against the ropes. His terrified cries blended with the groans of the collapsing machine. The detective hit the ground hard, rolling toward the remote. His fingers stretched out, but Daniel lunged at him, tackling him to the dirt. They wrestled in the flickering glow of the broken lights, fists pounding, curses flying. I didn't think. I ran. My knees screamed in protest, but I sprinted with everything left in me toward the Ferris wheel's ladder. Grandma, don't. Jacob's voice cracked with terror. But I climbed. My palms burned against the rusty steel. My breath sharpened my chest, but I forced myself higher. Every jolt of the wheel nearly sent me flying, but I held on. Below, Daniel's scream pierced the chaos. She's mine. He shoved the detective aside, grabbing a pipe from the ground, and charged toward the base of the wheel. His wild eyes locked on me, his broken smile stretching across his face. But then bang! The detective fired. The shot echoed across the fairground, and Daniel staggered back, the pipe clattering from his grip. He crumpled to the dirt, clutching his side, his laughter turning into wet, choking gasps. Still, I couldn't look down. My entire world was Jacob. Hold on, baby, I cried, pulling myself higher. The car swayed violently, bolts snapping loose one by one. Finally, I reached him. His cheeks were wet, his eyes wide with terror. Grandma! I fumbled with the ropes, my fingers trembling. I've got you, sweetheart. I'll never let you go. The ropes gave way, and I pulled him into my arms just as the entire Ferris wheel groaned one last time. The world tilted. The whole structure came crashing down. We dropped, tangled in ropes and steel. My arms wrapped tight around Jacob, shielding his body with mine. The wind roared in my ears, and for a moment I thought it was the end. Then a violent crash, a storm of sparks, the earth shaking. When the dust cleared, I opened my eyes. My body screamed in pain, but Jacob was alive. I could feel his tiny heartbeat racing against my chest. Grandma, you saved me, he whispered, his voice broken but alive. Tears streamed down my face. No, baby. You saved me. Police swarmed in, pulling us from the wreckage. The detective carried Jacob in his arms while another officer helped me stand. Behind us, the Ferris wheel lay twisted and broken, a monster slain. And Daniel, he lay motionless in the dirt, his eyes staring into nothing, his smile finally gone. For the first time in years, silence felt like peace. Later that night, my phone rang again. Dozens of calls, dozens of messages, voices I hadn't heard in years. Family, neighbors, strangers online, all calling after the news spread like wildfire. Some were apologies. Some were tears. Some were just silence, the kind of silence that says we see you now. I realized then, sometimes the people closest to you will laugh at your pain, but the world has a way of hearing the truth when it matters most. And as I held Jacob's hand in mine, I whispered the lesson I hoped everyone would remember. Never treat the people who raised you as a burden. One day, the hands you push away might be the very hands that save you. Broken Heart, thank you for listening to my story. My name is Maggie, and I'm from Ohio. I hope this story touched your heart. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification button for more stories like this. And before you leave, let me know, from which part of the country are you watching this?